Good morning, Hannah. It's a
Hi.
pleasure to interview you. Uh, and I first want to say a few words about you. Um, you are Hannah Klawes, and you are this year's social work intern at the Joseph Palombo Center. And we're most pleased to have you. They prefer the personal pronouns they, them, and theirs. They are a first-year social work student at the University of Chicago Crown Family School of Social Work, Policy and Practice, which was formerly the School of Social Service Administration, from which I graduated over half a century ago. And they are the voice and fingerprint behind uh, uh, the center's videos, content, a newsletter, and Facebook, of which she's done a wonderful job. So Hannah, would like to know a little bit about you. So why don't we start off by asking, what drew you to social work?
Yeah, you and I actually have a pretty similar road into social work in that we both started out in the humanities in academia. I have an English degree from Lawrence University, and I graduated in 2016. And I, at that point, had really no inklings of being in social work. And after that, I kind of stumbled into a social work job. A friend worked at this job that I had and referred me to it so that I might like it. I worked with college students with learning disabilities, on the autism spectrum, some other mental health kind of concerns and stuff. And I worked there for 3 years. My job title was coach, which doesn't mean the word's kind of general, but I did a lot of work. Some of it was kind of academic tutoring, but I also did coaching for emotional regulation, executive functioning, helped students clean their rooms, stuff like that. So I really loved that job and I really learned a lot there. But by the end of those 3 years, I felt that it was time to move on for a variety of reasons. So I actually applied for English PhD programs first, because that's where I decided I wanted to go. I was interested in being a professor. That was kind of the end goal of that. And didn't get into PhD programs as they are notoriously difficult to get into for the English discipline, and kind of very at the last minute applied for U Chicago because they actually extended their deadline because of COVID. So I was able to apply, and it was a bit of a a whirlwind, and I don't know, it was a little bit of, or not a little bit, very much a like kind of scary, uncertain point in my life because I knew I wanted to leave my job, but I wasn't sure how that was going to work. And then I got into U Chicago and moved to Chicago over the summer, and I started in the fall, and here I am. Kind of
So
a weird path, but it
where
happened.
where did you grow up and where did you first work? Where
Yeah.
was that?
So I'm from Madison, Wisconsin,
I know
and
the
then
blue state, yeah.
yeah, and then Lawrence University is in Appleton, Wisconsin, actually. And
Yeah.
then after graduating, I moved back to Madison, and the job that I'm talking about was in Madison. So
Was
most of my life has been in Madison.
yeah. Uh, I'm curious, uh, how old were the kids that you were working with, and what kinds of problems did they have?
Yeah, so my students were like anywhere between like 18 and like 24, 25.
Young
Some of,
adult? Yeah.
yeah, so some of them, most of them were like uh, trying college for their first time, straight out of high school. But we did have other students who like, this is their second time or third time trying out school, and it just didn't go super well before us. Yeah, it's just kind of uh, the way that I always thought about it, was just some folks who just needed a little bit more help, who just needed like a little bit more structure and guidance when it came to uh, doing college. Most of our students were at a community college in Madison, but we also had a few students at the university at UW. But yeah, as far as like kind of what was going on with them, a very wide range. Uh, Autism spectrum for a lot of them, nonverbal learning disabilities, dyslexia, dyscalculia, Some of them, like the main reason they were there was help with academics, and they were pretty confident in kind of social skills and social life. Other people, it was the other way around, where they, really had the book studying on lock, but needed more help kind of, making friends, being a part of the community, finding a job, that kind of stuff. So we did a lot of different work, and it really varied student to student. Yeah.
Great. Uh, are you sorry you didn't complete your career in English?
Sometimes. I think, there was a reason that I applied. Is something that I really care about.
Right.
Yeah, I think what was interesting though, looking back, like when I wrote, all of those application essays for my PhD programs, is the work I was interested in was very aligned with social work. I'm really interested in the utility of fiction and therapy, and that's very much what I planned on doing my dissertation
I'm
on.
sorry,
So
I didn't catch. You were interested in which aspect?
fiction and therapy.
Fiction, yeah.
Mhm.
Any
So
particular area of fiction or period?
yeah, so kind of what I was proposing to do my dissertation about was specifically speculative fiction, so science fiction and fantasy, um, because kind of where that came from is both it's my favorite genre, kind of what I love, and then so many of my students I worked with at my
Oh,
job were really into science fiction and fantasy, so it was this big kind of connecting point for us, and
right,
it became very clear to me that it wasn't just kind of a rapport building situation. It was also kind of like a tool for them and me processing kind of what was going on in their lives, like making kind of a community in and having a connecting point that way. And so now that I'm in social work school, kind of like almost on the other end of it, but doing very similar work.
yeah.
And also, you never know, maybe I'll go back and get my PhD or a master's in the humanities. I have a long time to figure it out. So,
It's nice to be young and have all the opportunities still open to you. Um, in terms of social work, um, you know, when I began to think about social work, there were so many alternative routes to take. Some had to do with therapy, some had to do with, working in social welfare. What is your vision as to where you would like to end up after you graduate?
yeah, so where I see myself the most clearly is mental health care, specifically individual therapy. My fieldwork placement for next year is very much in that line. I'll be working in a group private practice that specifically focuses on trauma work, which is where I see myself. I'm specifically really interested in working, like I just said, with trauma work. And then the queer community is a big priority of mine. And then I'm also interested in working with folks with kind of severe long-term mental illnesses, especially psychotic disorders, because it's a really underserved population and a lot of coercive work working with that population. So yeah, my interests are kind of all over the place, but I'm also trying to keep as many paths open as possible. So if I find something that's, I really like that I wasn't expecting, I'm not stuck, which is why I chose a social work program rather than counseling or psychology.
Do you have any leanings in a particular um, social work paradigm? I mean, the psychoanalytic or the relational, or what is your sense of, where you belong in all of this?
Yeah, so at U Chicago, I keep almost saying SSA, even though it's not called SSA
Right.
anymore. It the way that they do it is you choose a practice method that you take 2 classes in, and then you choose another one to just take 1 class in. And so the choices between psychodynamic, CBT, and family systems.
Yeah,
I chose psychodynamic partially because of you, because of JPC, because I really kind of got a taste for it first. I'm really interested in the connection between psychodynamic and kind of body somatic work, which is something I'm super interested in. So that's kind of first. But beyond that, I I'm going to do some convincing of UChicago to do an independent study on kind of more radical social work and queer theory and kind of just like the very new stuff that's happening. And I'm hoping that I can petition to kind of take the place of the other practice method we're supposed to do. So fingers crossed. Otherwise, I can do it as an elective, but that's kind of where my leanings
Tell
are
me
right
more
now.
about what is this larger context that you'd like to expand?
Yeah, I mean, kind of the idea is the deconstruction of kind of the primacy of mostly cognitive behavioral theory, but kind of taking apart kind of some of the things that have been like really central to therapy as a field and kind of questioning that and deciding like which pieces of that do we still need, which pieces do we not, like what's next is kind of from what I know, like what radical theory around social work is. It's very social justice oriented, and it kind of could mean a lot of different things. But yeah, it's, I guess the way that I'm understanding it, and also I'm obviously new to the field, is just kind of what's
Right.
next and how are we going to get there?
Right. So how do you see the issues of social justice entering into all of that? I mean,
Yeah,
that's a big topic nowadays, and there's a lot of concern about Black Lives Matter. So yeah, where do you stand with that?
yeah. I mean, that is a huge priority of mine. I just got done interviewing for a million places for fieldwork next year, and that was a question I asked all of the people I was interviewing was, how does your practice incorporate social justice? Because that's a huge
Right.
priority of mine. So I guess I can answer it in a couple ways. Right now, how I'm trying to incorporate it is specifically with my content for JPC. We're working on making some specifically social justice oriented content, which is taking a little longer than I hope it would, but you know, logistics are logistics.
Yeah.
So we're planning on talking about kind of the relationship between race and neuroscience. I have some content planned for between trans folks and neuroscience. A lot of other things kind of brewing. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my work. And then personally, really investing in mutual aid and kind of seeking out education from people who are, you know, putting content out there. Social media is like such a deep well of people sharing knowledge from experiences that I don't personally have. And then as far as my fieldwork next year, part of the reason I accepted the position where I'm going is because they had a really good answer for social justice, the social justice question. I believe, I don't remember exactly the details, but they have like a regular kind of discussion group where they, you know, choose a topic and kind of do research on it. And then as a team, talk about it together and decide how to incorporate it into, you know, the practice and like what are some actionable steps they can take to like really make sure that their practice is social justice oriented.
Are they primarily therapy oriented, one-to-one therapy oriented?
They do individual therapy and group therapy. That's mostly what they do.
Great. Well,
No, you froze.
so I'm sort of curious, when you were first approached about coming to the center, um, what were your thoughts about that? Because you wanted to go in a different direction, I know. And so how did you reconcile your interest with becoming a student here?
Yeah, not gonna lie, at first I was a little confused and a little disappointed about it being an admin position because, as
Yeah,
I've said, clinical work is really where my heart is and where I intend on going. And then also, I'm just your first intern, so I was just kind of like not entirely sure what I would be doing. But now that I've been in it for a while, it's been really cool being the one to come up with content and the one to kind of like decide what I'm doing, and I get to kind of make it what I want to be. And also just, you know, working with you, working with Amy, working with Bill, you know, you guys are really experienced and knowledgeable clinicians. So learning from you has been really amazing. And I think it kind of sets the tone for the rest of my time at UChicago, kind of starting from a a research place and learning new things. And then actually Amy and I are working on me taking a couple taking a couple clients is the word I meant to say,
Yeah.
through her private practice. So I will actually end up doing some clinical work. So it's kind of a best of all possible worlds.
So what's the greatest influence that the content of the center has had on your thinking? And what has most sort of impacted on your view?
Yeah, I mean, kind of surface level first is kind of, it's what pushed me to want to take the psychodynamic classes at UChicago.
Yeah.
Because, you've already done, this series of presentations about, that area. And then also Amy is a psychodynamic therapist. So we've talked a fair amount about like what her sessions look like and kind of what she incorporates into them. And she and I feel have very aligned kind of views about therapy and approaches. So it's been good to kind of confirm that and figure out where I'm going. And then as far as like, the learning disorder series we're working on or some of the presentations, I find it really helpful to understand like what's going on in the brain, kind of like what what your body is doing and meaning in the middle of it, because I think that's a good anchoring point and something that is really interesting for me to return to. So yeah, I guess things that I already knew and kind of was in the realm of, but kind of the specifics of it are new, and that's been really exciting to kind of see how I could use it in my work in the future.
Well, it certainly links with your work experience in medicine.
Yeah, very convenient. I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, yeah.
A context for what you were doing there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now, speaking somewhat differently, what criticism would you have either of what we do at the center or of the field? Have you thought some about that? What's the downside of all of this?
Absolutely. I think to answer the broader question, the fields, I mean, there's no way to deny that social work as a field is deeply embedded with white supremacy and white saviorism and kind of the beginnings of social work, a lot of it being about, working with Indigenous folks in resident homes and kind of a lot of coercive colonizing behavior is something that I think people don't like to think about with social work. I was talking to a friend of mine who doesn't know much about social work, and she said something along the lines of like, it must be really nice to be in a field and a job that you know that you're doing good work. And I was very quick to be like, well, I certainly have good intentions, but there are so many different ways that like, especially as a white person, I have a lot of power over any people of color clients I would have. And like the potential for, accidentally causing harm is super high and something that I am still figuring out kind of how to reckon with and what I need to do in day-to-day life to really make sure that I'm practicing anti-racism in a meaningful way, because the field has not always been good at that. I think right now, in my classes, it's been like a huge focus of like analyzing, social work as a field and individuals as social workers and how we can really meaningfully have anti-oppressive practices. But yeah, I mean, it's certainly a journey. And I think it's easy to get complacent when you think you're the good guy, when you think that you're doing things right. But you still have to question that. And I think that's something that I'm trying to be really careful about and really on my mind. So yeah, I think that's like the main things I've been thinking about as far as criticism. There's been, with the Black Lives Matter movement, there's been a lot of call to defund the police or dismantle the police, which I call myself an abolitionist. I consider myself one. But there's been a lot of call to kind of replace the necessary functions of the police with social workers, which I don't think social workers shouldn't have that job. I just think we shouldn't assume that just because the job title is social worker rather than police officer, that automatically means that it'll be anti-oppressive.
Mm-hmm. So you really referring to the implicit racism that is not recognized by us white folks often.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's interesting. Um, you know, in my generation, it's like people don't even think that way, that they're, you know, and so it's interesting for me to hear about you and your generation, how you see things so differently. Um, I'm glad it's sort of the content in your classes. Um, have you, by any chance, encountered any of that at the center that you would like to point out?
Nothing specific comes to mind, but I think one of my goals, in addition to making social justice content, is to hire people that fall into marginalized identities and marginalized experiences to do content with us, which is something that I'm still kind of figuring out how that would work, you know, like finding people, kind of figuring out, you know, vetting people for the content, figuring out how much to pay them, kind of like the logistics of it. But that's something that I think would be really powerful, kind of, you know, letting the people who it matters to, who it's relevant for, speak on it themselves. So that's something that I am really hoping that can kind of work out, something that's a priority for me. Other than that, I mean, I talked a lot about race, but other social justice kind of populations that are really important. I mean, trans community, the disabled community, that kind of stuff. It's interesting being kind of a part of the JPC board, like both as a trans person and as a mentally ill person. And it's just, I don't know. It's been something I've been thinking about a lot, not necessarily with JPC specifically, but just kind of my life as a social worker in general.
Right.
Having the personal experience of being a marginalized person, but then at the same time, also being white. So I think I got a little bit away from the answer to that question, but those are kind of the things that are on my mind.
No, that's helpful, you know, because one of the concerns we've had at ICSW, the Institute for Clinical Social Work, is recruiting both faculty and students of color.
Mm-hmm.
And the whole psychotherapy field was primarily a white male.
Mm-hmm.
There were some white women, of course, but far from being integrated with the larger communities. All right. Anything else you'd like to add, or that we haven't covered?
I guess one of the things, and I kind of alluded to this earlier, that's really been on my mind is specifically being gender nonconforming, trans, non-binary. All those words fit me in this field thus far. Being in grad school, and this internship is actually the first time I've been publicly out using they, them pronouns.
Right.
Before that, friends of mine and family of mine knew and, you know, referred to me as, but this is the first public place. And I think it's been a really interesting experience, kind of reckoning with that and kind of the isolation that comes along with kind of being non-normative. And I guess for anyone who might be watching this who's in a similar boat to me, I really empathize with you, and it can be hard, but it's also been really rewarding to be my truest self in a field that is all about respecting people's truest selves. So yeah, that's kind of, I guess, where my brain takes me next, is honoring my own experience and bringing it to the table in ways that are important to me.
Well, I would hope that we have accepted you fully for who you are, and it, made room for you in a way that enriches your experience. Um, I am personally delighted to have had you as the intern of the center, and very much appreciated all the contributions that you've made so far. So, I wish you well in the long career ahead of you. And thank you very much for being a part of us.
Yeah, for sure. Thank you for having me. It's been a joy, and I'm really looking forward to, the rest of it, because I'm planning on staying with you guys through the summer. So we still got a lot of time together.
Yes.
All right.
Thank
Well,
you.
thanks so much.